been covering rational expressions, and what do those have in them? Variables, and what else? What have our variables been in? Fractions. So now we're going to be dealing with variables in fractions with equations. So on this first one, our variables are in the numerator. Okay, and this is kind of just to get us started. Most of the time when we're working with rational equations, our variables are going to be in the denominator. Alright, now the easiest way, to work with rational equations is just to try and get rid of all of the fractions from the very beginning. Okay, so we would do that by what? Alright, so how do we get rid of fractions in an equation? Yeah, so if all of our denominators are the same, like say 2, I would multiply everything by 2 and it gets rid of them. Okay? What happens if they're different though? How do I choose what to multiply by? So we could, it's kind of a long way around. Not by itself. Not the reciprocal. So if I wanted to pick a number that would reduce with both 3 and 4, what number would I pick? What's a number? Yeah, so 12. Both 3 and 4 go into 12. Do we remember what that's called? I'm looking for the smallest number. Yeah, my least common multiple. So I want to multiply both or everything by our least common multiple. Yes. So if we do that on this one, now because it's an equation, I do have to do it to both sides. Okay, so I'm going to multiply or basically distribute. That should be a 3. So 3 times 12 plus 3x divided by 4 times 12 equals 2 times 12. So on our first one, what reduces? Or in other words, how many times does 3 go into 12? 4. So my 3 goes into 12 4 times. I would multiply my 4 by the x. So what are we left with? So what is x times 4? 4x. Alright. Now how many times does 4 go into 12? 3. Okay. However, I already have a 3x, so this time I'd have to do 3 times 3, which gives us 9x equals what? 24. 4x plus 9x gives us 13x. And then what would my last step be? Divide by 13. So we end up with a fraction. But that's okay. Fractions are real numbers too. We can get answers that are fractions and they'll still work just the same. Questions on that one? Now, like I said, that one doesn't have variables in the denominator. However, our process is still going to be the same. So on this one, I do have variables in the denominator, but we also have to have some numbers. So we're looking at the least common multiple of x plus 3, 6, and 18. So we first just want to look at our numbers. So what is our least common multiple of 6 and 18? So remember, not a factor, but a multiple. So not what goes into them, but what do they go into? 18. Now, will x plus 3 go into 18? Will x plus 3 go into itself? Yes, so we need to add an x plus 3 here. Does that make sense? Just like on our last one, 3 and 4, neither one of those goes into each other, so we check use both of them. If the x plus 3 doesn't go into it, we just have to put it on there by itself, basically. So now, we're going to multiply everything by our 18 times x plus 3. And I'm going to multiply each of my fractions by that. Let's do multiply. There we go. 18 times x plus 3 plus 6 times 18 times x plus 3 equals 23 over 18. Times 18 times x plus 3. So on my first two, or on my first fraction, what reduces here? The x plus 3. On my second one, what reduces? 6 goes into 18 3 times. And then on my last one, my 18s reduce. So then we just need to do some simplifying. What is 4 times 18? 72. Plus 5 times 3 gives us 15. And I still have an x plus 3 there. And then on my last one, we just have a 23 times x plus 3. Agreed? And then from there, we're just going to solve. So what's our first step? To distribute. So we have 15x plus 15 times 3 gives us 45. And then we have 23x, and 23 times 3 gives us 69. So then 72 plus 45 on the left-hand side gives me what? 117. And then if I go ahead and subtract over my 15x, what is 23x minus 15x? 8x. So then my next two steps, I'm going to subtract my 69. So 117 minus 69 is 48. And then divide by 8. So we get x equals 6. Now, what is our last step that y'all tend to forget that our directions tell us to do? Check your solution. Now, when you were like just starting out solving stuff, we wanted to check our solution to make sure that it actually worked like as. This is a true statement. What it means here, though, is because we have fractions, what are we not allowed to have with our fractions? 0 where? In the denominator. So we don't need to check and make sure that it works because we're big kids. We solved correctly. Okay, but we do need to make sure, does my answer make any of my denominators 0? So does my answer make any of my denominators 0 in this case? No, what answer would we have not been able to have? Negative 3. So we did not get that as an answer, so 6 is just the answer. Questions on that? No? Okay. Let's look at another one. So on this one, we have x's this time in all of our denominators. So that's okay. What do we notice about any of our denominators? One is squared. Okay, what can we usually do with things that are squared? You don't want to square root it, but I do agree, like we want to try and simplify it. We want to make it simpler. Yeah, we want to factor it, okay? So how would we factor that? Difference of squares. So what is that going to become? And then x plus 2. Agreed. Okay. Well, that's nice because what are my other two denominators? Those things, yes? So notice that for our three things, our least common multiple is just going to be x minus 2 times x plus 2. Because x minus 2 for my first one will go into that, x plus 2 for my second one will go into that, and itself will go into it, right? So that is what I'm going to multiply the whole equation by. So for my first fraction, when we distribute, okay, what is going to reduce?
X minus.
Okay, so what would we be left with? Yep, which is just going to be x plus 2. Now, when I distribute it to the second one, what's going to reduce? The x plus 2's. But notice this time we are left with a 3, okay? And then what else is left? X minus 2. And then what reduces on the last one? Both of them. So we're just left with a minus 6. So then what do we want to do? Distribute. So we get 3x minus 6 minus 6x. 3x minus 6x gives us negative 3x minus 6. If I add my 3x, I get 4x. Subtract my 2, negative 8x. So we get x equals negative 2. But what did we say our last step is going to be? Check your solution. So this time, does negative 2 make any of my denominators 0?
Yes.
Does it? Which one?
The 3 over x plus 2.
Any others? Right? Because if I square negative 2, I get a 4. 4 minus 4 is also 0. So my last two, we cannot have negative 2 in the denominator. So does it work? So if it doesn't work, what's my answer? No solution. So just write no solution. All that work for no solution. Questions on that? Alright, we just have one last example. It looks a little bit longer, but it's going to be fine, I promise. So what did we say we want to look for first? Yep, but in order to find our least common multiple, what might it be helpful to do? Factor. So which one are we going to need to factor? So what multiplies together to give me 15. That adds together to give me 8. 5 and 3. Well, that's helpful. Because now, what's my least common multiple going to be? Not 15, because remember, if I had numbers, it could be 15, but because I have like x plus 5 and x plus 3, like if I just had 15, the x plus 3 wouldn't go into it. Or the x plus 5 wouldn't go into it.
X plus 5 times x plus 6.
Yeah, it's just going to be those two factors. So x plus 5 and x plus 3. So then, if I multiply, what's going to reduce on my first one? When I multiply all of this to the 2x1. My x plus 5 reduces, so we have 2x times x plus 3 left. Now, what reduces on my second one? Both of them? Agreed? So what are we left with? Be careful. What are we doing with that? What operation is there? Before that fraction. Oh, subtraction. Yeah, so we're subtracting that stuff. So it's basically like a negative. So you either need to distribute your negative, so I would have negative x squared plus x plus 10, okay? Or you could put like minus and then put a parentheses. But either way, we're subtracting all of that stuff, so you need to like apply the negative. And then what's going to reduce on my last one? Okay, so what are we left with? Agreed. And then we're going to do what? Distribute, which is multiplication. So I have 2x squared plus 6x minus x squared plus x plus 10 equals 3x plus 15. So 2x squared minus x squared just gives us x squared plus 7x plus 10. What type of equation are we going to have? There's a little 2. What's the little 2? It is a quadratic, okay? And what do we usually want to try first when we have a quadratic? Yeah, we want to see if it factors. Because if it factors, it's a whole heck of a lot easier than trying to use the quadratic formula or something like that. So how do we check and see if it factors? Can I factor it right now? Yeah, so I need to move everything to one side. Well, since my x squared is already positive on that side, I would probably subtract the right side. So we get x squared plus 4x minus 5. So what multiplies together to give me negative 5? That adds together to give me 4. What do we think?
5 is negative 5.
Agreed. So then what are our answers?
Negative 5 and plus 1.
Okay, so what do we need to do with those? Trick them, yeah? So does negative 5 make any of our denominators 0? Yes, so does it work? No. Does 1 make any of my denominators 0? No, so that means that 1 would be my answer. So sometimes we might have one solution, sometimes we might have no solution. Sometimes both of them could work, so you could end up with 2 solutions, but we always need to make sure that we check them to see if any of them make the denominator 0.